In 1832, 4 children stepped beyond the safety of home and into the vast, unyielding forest of Upper Canada. What began as a simple adventure ended in tragedy, one that shattered families, unsettled a community, sparked suspicion, fueled supernatural fears, and left provincial authorities grasping for answers. Nearly 2 centuries later, only whispered theories remain, and a mystery that has never been solved. The following story contains disturbing details. Viewer discretion isn't just advised, it's required. Hornings Mills, a small, secluded hamlet in Dufferin County, Ontario. If you found yourself here, it's because you've probably made a wrong turn somewhere. A tiny cluster of residences, it's a liminal place that once aspired to be a village but is now just an echo of that promise. Time stands still here because it's neither truly alive nor entirely gone. And perhaps that's because behind its quiet isolation lies a disturbing mystery. In the early 1800s, Hornings Mills was a tiny settlement deep in the wilderness. Founded by Lewis Horning at the headwaters of the Pine River, it stood as an island of human civilization amid a vast ocean of uncharted forest. Not far away, along ancient trails, the Anishinaabe, also known as the Ojibwe, kept their camps, living close to the land as their ancestors had for generations. Among the children of the pioneer settlement were 9-year-old Lewis Horning Jr., son of its founder, and the 3 Van Meer siblings, 16-year-old Jane, her 14-year-old sister Susan, and their younger brother Oliver, also 9. Historical records describe Oliver as foolish, a period euphemism likely referring to what we would now understand as a cognitive disability. The story began in the summer of 1832, when one of Lewis Horning's cows left the settlement and wandered deep into the woods to give birth. Each day, the cow returned to the farm, leaving its calf behind, hidden somewhere in the woods. Horning searched for the valuable animal but couldn't find it. At the same time, the framework for one of the new mills had just been completed. A project that had drawn family, friends, and other settlers from great distances. Distracted by that project, and eager to claim the calf hiding in the forest, Horning offered a $1 reward to anyone who could find it and bring it home. That would be about $40 today. When the children heard about the prize, it must have sparked excitement and discussion. A sizable fortune within their reach. On July 14th, Lewis Horning set out with a group of volunteers, guiding them to a pioneer road 26 miles away. Back at the settlement, with the adults occupied, the 4 children made a quiet decision. They were going to earn that dollar. Lewis Horning Jr. and the Van Meer siblings set off to find the missing calf. It seems they didn't tell anyone what they were planning. In their minds, it was simple. A few hours of adventure, a triumphant return with the animal, and a well-deserved reward. They would be heroes. When no one was looking, they took a length of rope and followed the Pine River downstream, slipping into the cool, shadowed hush of the forest. Hours passed before anyone realized the children were missing. A search party was quickly organized. The children's footprints were soon located along the banks of the river. Their trail led east into the swampy lowlands of the Pine River Valley. Their tracks were followed. Searchers were confident that they would lead to the children. According to various accounts, additional tracks were discovered alongside those of the children. Anxiety elevated. Fear rose immediately that the strange prints belonged to abductors. No one seemed to think that they may have been the prints of previous searchers left in the confusion. Other sources, however, report that the tracks could not even be identified. What is clear is that all the tracks, including those of the children, vanished, and the trail was lost. At that point, absolute panic set in, and Louis Horning was sent for. He returned home the next day to take charge. For weeks, settlers combed the forests, calling the names of the children. The search stretched well beyond Horning's Mills, with people from surrounding areas traveling miles to join in. The disappearance of the children sent shockwaves through the region. Even government officials from Upper Canada became involved. It was rapidly becoming a mystery of growing magnitude without a single clue to follow. Unsurprisingly, some settlers, including members of the Horning family, suspected that nearby Indigenous people had kidnapped the children and were holding them captive. The Anishinaabe instantly became convenient if circumstantial suspects. Each nearby Ojibwe band was investigated and their camps searched. No evidence of Indigenous involvement was found, and they were cleared of any wrongdoing. Still, the belief persisted amongst settlers, and it probably led investigators down the wrong path, wasting precious time and effort. Missionaries in the area were contacted and told to keep an eye out for settler children in the company of Indigenous people. Word spread to other settlements by traders, hunters, and trappers. Still, there was no sign of Jane, Susan, Oliver, or Louis Jr. The Horning family, in desperate need of answers, became convinced that the Ojibwe not only abducted the children, but were conspiring to hide them, deliberately keeping them out of sight whenever authorities searched their camps. Although the Anishinaabe had been investigated and found innocent, local bands sensed the growing animosity, and fearing retribution from the settlers, many decamped from the area and relocated to friendlier parts. The search for the missing children of Horning's Mills was extensive and continued for years. Not a single trace of them was ever found, and there is no record that the missing calf, the catalyst for the entire ordeal, was ever recovered. It was as if they had all been swallowed whole by the limitless forest. The tragedy of the lost children cast a long shadow over Horning's Mills. Settlers became uneasy. Many families left altogether. Louis Horning was never the same after the loss of his son. Perhaps he blamed himself for offering the reward that had inspired the children to go off on their own. Rumors swirled that he actively discouraged new settlers, fearing the land was cursed. Horning's wife fell into deep despair, and her depression lasted years. Settlers in the area whispered dark theories, but not everyone believed the children had been taken by the Anishinaabe. Their disappearance felt like something otherworldly. Older, superstitious explanations took hold. Quiet whispers shared around fires late into the night. Few dared to enter the woods alone, afraid of being taken by something unknown, something that defied explanation. Eventually, Louis Horning and his family abandoned the settlement, never to return. Horning's Mills stagnated for a time. It had become a place to be avoided. Years later, in Toronto Township, a young man with an intellectual disability was found exhibiting odd behavior and was interviewed by the authorities. He either claimed or was told that he was Oliver Van Meer, one of the missing children. This young man's story, full of inconsistencies and strung together from a barrage of leading questions, told of being abducted by Indians. He struggled to answer questions. His tale shifted under pressure and made very little sense. The Van Meer family, who had been devastated by the loss of 3 children, eventually dismissed him as an imposter, and the young man quickly vanished, leaving more questions than answers. The Pine River Valley. Somewhere here, the children met their fate. Some say their ghosts still haunt the woods along this watercourse, but nearly 200 years later, the central question remains: how could 4 children vanish without a trace? The imposter's vague testimony was widely accepted by people of the time, and historians used it to reinforce the theory of an indigenous kidnapping, an easy explanation that became embedded in local history as fact. But under closer examination, that narrative unravels. Not only was there no evidence to implicate them, at the time of the children's disappearance, indigenous communities were under immense pressure. Displaced by settlers, divided by imposed treaties, and struggling to maintain their ways of life. The notion that they would have abducted settler children and conspired to hold them captive does not withstand historical scrutiny or logic. It would have been both reckless and self-destructive. Such an act would have risked violent retaliation. If the children had been held captive for years, it would have required a vast conspiracy, one involving dozens, if not hundreds, of people. A secret that large would eventually collapse under its own weight. And for what? There was no ransom, no demand, no possible motive makes any sense. If the children were abducted, it may not have been by those first accused. Other settlers, passing traders, or an unknown party moving through the area remain possible suspects. Whatever the truth, something terrible may have happened. The children could have been the victims of a horrific, unsolved crime. Their bodies may have been deliberately hidden, buried deep, or destroyed by fire to erase all evidence. If it was a crime, those responsible remained in the shadows and faded into history, unnamed and unpunished. If the children had simply wandered off and succumbed to the elements, some evidence, bones, scraps of clothing, should have been found, yet no such traces were ever discovered. Why? Their tracks were discovered in a swampy lowland. If the children had ventured too far in, they might have become trapped in the muck, sinking, drowning, their bodies swallowed entirely by the mud. They could have encountered a large predator, a bear, wolf, or cougar. Historical documents indicate some settlers believed the children had been attacked and torn to pieces by some unknown beast. The dense forest, with its high humidity, microbial activity, and scavenger presence, could have accelerated decomposition. If the children died in a remote spot, their remains might have disintegrated before anyone found them. Landslides, river sediment, or fallen trees could have buried the bodies. There are other possibilities. The Niagara Escarpment stretches over 700 kilometers across southern Ontario, passing through the very region where the children vanished. Marked by deep caves, crevices, and sinkholes, it's a landscape shaped by hidden dangers. If the children took shelter in one of these natural features or slipped into a concealed fissure, a sudden cave-in could have buried them beyond reach. It's possible their remains still lie hidden in some deep, untouched crevice, preserved by cold and time, still waiting to be found. The total absence of remains is one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. If it were a single child, we might assume they wandered too far and were lost to the elements. But for 4 children to vanish without a trace challenges conventional explanations and compels us to consider the possibility that something truly strange occurred. Folklore and modern paranormal theories include time slips, strange events where someone seems to vanish as if they've stepped into another time or dimension. Some believe time slips are glitches in reality, brief openings to parallel worlds, distortions in space-time, or tears between dimensions. Certain places, charged by storms, solar flares, or intense emotion, might weaken the barriers of reality just enough for someone to slip through and never come back. What if the children actually vanished from this world and slipped into another reality altogether? Before you dismiss this idea, consider these cases from the historical record. In 1875, Northwest Mounted Police Officer Cecil Denny was caught in a violent, otherworldly electrical storm while canoeing alone on the Old Man River in Western Canada. Seeking shelter, he stumbled upon what seemed to be a bustling Indigenous encampment, but after being engulfed by a blaze of lightning that left him momentarily senseless, he was terrified to discover the entire village had suddenly vanished. It was later confirmed that a Cree settlement had once stood at that very spot, its inhabitants massacred years earlier by a rival First Nation. The incident sparked chilling speculation that Denny had briefly slipped through the fabric of time itself. Then there's the case of Mrs. Hunter in July of 1892. She was visiting her daughter, Mrs. John Arnberg, at the family farm near Eagle Lake, just north of Haliburton, Ontario. One afternoon, Mrs. Hunter told her daughter she was going to walk out to the road to pick some wildflowers. She passed through the farm gate and vanished. When her absence was noticed, searchers followed her footprints. They led 150 feet from the gate and then just ended. Suddenly and inexplicably, as if she had slipped completely out of this world. The search for Mrs. Hunter continued for years, and like the Hornings Mills children, no trace of her was ever found either. Before European settlement, the Anishinaabe lived among these forests, rivers, and hills. They believed the land was alive with spiritual forces, powerful beings known as Manitous, who shaped and influenced the world around them. Among these Manitous were the Mamagwasawag, the hidden ones, small, hair-covered beings said to cause mischief and disappear without a trace, sometimes taking children with them. Elders spoke of real encounters with these elusive spirits, passing down stories of their presence across generations. The most terrifying Manitou was the Wendigo, a towering skeletal figure with jagged teeth and skin stretched tight over its bones, forever consumed by an insatiable hunger for flesh. Though often linked to winter and famine, the Wendigo's influence was said to linger long after the thaw, haunting the forest and preying on the lost and desperate. Though separated by culture and distrust, both the Anishinaabe and Irish settlers shared a belief in the same elusive presence in the land, unseen beings lurking in the shadows. When the Irish came to the area, the rolling hills, hidden caves, and babbling brooks of this new land echoed the landscapes of their distant homeland. To the settlers, such places belonged to the fairies, fearful beings notorious for stealing children away, very much like the Mamagwasawag. Dufferin County folklore tell of early settlers who glimpsed strange lights flickering in the trees and encounters with beings not quite human. To protect their young, some Irish families placed drops of urine on them, a strange kind of baptism, hoping the fairies would find their children too unclean to take. Containers of foot water, unemptied chamber pots, red ribbons, and various religious charms were all used to keep the unseen forces at bay. Consider the chilling consistency of these tales, not only shared by the Irish and the Anishinaabe, but echoed across cultures around the world. In Norse folklore, the Hulda folk, hidden people, were said to live parallel lives just beyond human sight, sometimes taking children they fancied. Even in Japan, tales of the yokai tell of an old mountain witch named Yamauba who lures lost children deep into the forest. In our modern world, the face of otherworldly abductors has evolved. Perhaps the Hornings Mills children were taken by something that had no name or concept in that period. These stories are not merely isolated myths. They are patterns, persistent cross-cultural echoes of something uncanny, something old, still lingering in places where the boundaries of our world grow thin. And this brings us to one last unsettling possibility. Could a force beyond human understanding have taken the children? Something ancient, unnamed, hidden for centuries behind myths and masks. Fairies, the Mamagwasawag, the Wendigo, UFOs, aliens. Different names, maybe, for the same unknowable presence. Something as old as our planet that pulls at the edges of perception, yet never fully reveals itself. What if the land itself is somehow aware, sentient? If the wilderness is perceptive and predatory, it could be likened to a trap, purposefully leading people astray. Those who become lost in the wilderness often speak of an eerie, almost supernatural disorientation. Dense forests and ancient rock formations seem to shift in silence. Trails twist back on themselves. Time loses meaning. The deeper one ventures, the more the familiar world seems to dissolve away. Perhaps some people never escape, until, without warning, they're gone. Disappearances like the Hornings Mills children are not unique. The missing 411 phenomenon refers to hundreds of unsolved vanishings, many involving children and hikers in remote regions across North America. In Canada alone, over 170 people have disappeared without a trace. Like the Hornings Mills children and Mrs. Hunter, these cases share disturbing patterns. No signs of struggle, no distress, no explanation. Just sudden absence. Are these ancient spaces watching and waiting for the unwary? Whatever took the children of Hornings Mills, be it beast, bog, a breach in reality, or something beyond our understanding, their story endures as a warning that echoes from the past into realms older than memory, where stillness reigns and no answers ever come. Because in the end, this isn't just a story about loss. It's about what happens to those left behind, how the human need for meaning can twist into suspicion, how grief can scatter people down false paths, and how some events in this world offer no trail to follow, no hint of resolution, only silence. It is we who must navigate the landscape of the unknown, and in doing so, there is always the risk of getting lost. So the next time you find yourself alone in the magnitude of the wild, take a moment, think of them. The possibility of vanishing without a trace might suddenly feel very real. And if it happened to you, who would ever know where you'd gone? Or when? If you've enjoyed this journey into the eerie and strange, consider clicking subscribe and notifications. Your likes and comments are greatly appreciated and will help keep this channel alive and growing. And if you know of a strange story from your area of Canada, maybe buried deep in the past in your community newspaper archives, let me know, and I'll consider adding it to the lineup of upcoming episodes. Thanks for watching, and remember, strange stories don't die. They wait to be found.